Welcome back to Community Design Review, where we look at some of this week's best designs from the Custom Magic subreddit, as voted on by you, the community. Our first shoutout this week is the Tormod story cards. These 7 cards show the story of Tormod, a grave robber turned necromancer who is executed, but continues his work even in death. Quick impressions. Grave robber is a cool ability that hasn't been done much. Maybe makes more sense at uncommon? Church of Tau feels a little off. I'm not sure why they're searching for artifacts, though the ability is kind of cool and gives white some on-theme card advantage. Talish Investigator is awesome, definitely fits the flavor, and gives white some on-theme card advantage. Defensive Tormod is awkward. Generally, a spell with kicker or multi-kicker needs to do something even if you don't kick it. I would just get rid of the multi-kicker and have it exile any number of creature cards from graveyards, then create that many 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. Mob Aggression is a flavorful white removal spell that pays off the white theme of going wide. Tormod's Crypt is a reprint that we all know and love. Tormod Grave Marauder has a sweet ability, though it's going to cost a lot of mana to take advantage of it, and Swag Tormod's biblical flavor text just kind of feels out of place. Apparently Tormod is Jesus now. Our second shoutout is Prophetic Flames. It costs 1 red for an instant that deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker, then scry X, where X is the excess damage dealt. Now this is really cool. Wizards has just started experimenting with using excess damage for other things, and this is a great means of furthering that idea. It makes it more useful to use your burn on a tiny creature, so you don't have to feel bad about wasting the extra damage. And scry is a nice small effect that I honestly always want to see more of in the game. Moving on to our top 5 for this week. Number 5 is Courageous Advance. It costs 1 white for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures of the chosen type get +1/+1. Not just the creatures you control, all creatures of the chosen type. And when you attack with 3 or more creatures of that type, transform it into Days of Glory, which is an enchantment, where creatures of the chosen type get +2/+2, and during each of your turns, you may cast 1 creature spell of the chosen type from your graveyard. Okay, this is a mouthful, but it's a tribal anthem that eventually lets you start replaying your creatures. It's a really sweet design. The only nitpick that I have is that the anthems affect all creatures of the chosen type, but the final ability only lets you play creatures of that type from your own graveyard. It feels like either the anthems should only affect your creatures, or you should be able to play creatures from any graveyard. And that way all the abilities are encompassing the same creatures. But that's a minor thing. Still a very cool card. Number 4 is Sparkle's Eternal Friend. It costs white for a 3/3 legendary creature, zombie unicorn with, if Sparkles would leave the battlefield, exile it instead and you lose 5 life. Then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of your next upkeep. So this is a creature that's impossible to kill. It'll just keep coming back to play with you again and again, but it hurts you each time. Now, a lot of people seem to be saying that this body is weak. And yeah, a vanilla 3/3 is nothing exciting, but don't underestimate the power of an invincible creature. Maybe it's too vanilla for Commander, but I could see this making a real impact in Standard, especially if combined with sacrifice outlets and ways to gain life. Sure, 5 life is a lot, but I really like this design. I mean, aside from the nightmares it's going to give me. At number 3, we have Equality, which costs 1 white for a legendary enchantment with, if an opponent would draw a card except the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, they may have you draw a card. If that player doesn't, that player skips that draw. And 4 white, each opponent draws a card. Yet another attempt at white card draw, and this one seems fine. It lets you piggyback off opponents' draws, but only if they allow it. Still, in a multiplayer game like Commander, what are they going to do? Just never draw? I mean, say I have a divination. It's better for me to draw 2 cards and allow you to draw 2 cards than to just never play my draw spell. It still gives me an advantage over the other 2 players at the table. So that part of the card works well. For the activated ability, it is true that you may pay 5 mana and nothing will happen because each opponent will mutually choose not to give anyone any benefits. But knowing that, you have the ability to just not activate this unless you have nothing else to do with your mana. And if you do choose to activate this, you can still use it as a political tool to ally with another player, to give them an opportunity to turn on each other. It's a fine added effect that the card should not be judged on. Number 2 this week is what I am calling the Threshold Boon cycle. Now, Threshold is a mechanic that has 2 modes. It either does nothing, or it's active as long as you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard. Other mechanics are nicknamed threshold mechanics as long as they also activate only once you've reached a certain qualifier. Most of the mechanics on these cards fit that description. Now this cycle is based on the alpha boons, which are famously over and or underpowered. Grave Ritual seems close enough to Dark Ritual, giving you 1 black mana, another if a creature died this turn, and a third if you have Threshold. Primal Bolt deals 1 damage, another if you attacked this turn, and another if you have no cards in hand. However, Healing Faith has a much higher ceiling than the original Healing Salve. It gains 3 life, 3 more if you cast it during your main phase, and 3 more if you only had 5 or less life to begin with. Ferocious Growth is like Giant Growth, but it gives counters instead of temporary +1/+1. It gives an additional counter if you have a creature with 4 or more power, and an additional counter if your creatures have total power 8 or greater. The only card here with a lower power ceiling is Ancestral Foresight, because of course it is. It always draws you a card, but instead of drawing more cards when upgraded, it gives you Scry. Scry 1 if you have at least 2 instant and or sorcery cards in your graveyard, and Scry 1 if you control 3 or more artifacts. These cards are amazing. They aren't direct analogs to the original boons, but they shouldn't be. These still evoke the feel of those cards while being much more balanced. And upgrading the cards by throwing on 10 different ability words, each one in an appropriate color, is so cool. The only real nitpick is that black doesn't usually get ramp like this, but it can, and for such a flavorful cycle, I'm completely on board. And the number 1 card this week chosen by the community is the Axel Lotus. That's very cute. It's a 0/1 legendary creature, Salamander, for hybrid green-blue. It has all mana abilities of all other permanents you control. And as long as you have white, blue, black, red, green in your mana pool, you and permanents you control have hexproof. Okay, the first ability is amazing. This is such a cool mana dork. It'll copy mana from your lands, from other mana dorks, from artifacts. I love it so much. Now, it is a bit of a bend in blue, which can get mana dorks, but not usually with colored mana and not as a 1-drop. But it's not a break, so I can look past it. The second ability is not even a bend. Both blue and green can give your stuff hexproof, but it's just a very weird ability. This is some untapped design space. In response to something of yours being targeted, you just tap all your mana and protect your stuff. And because mana abilities are faster than instants, that can't even be responded to with a second removal spell. So it's very strong, but of course, having access to all 5 colors should give you something strong. This is an awesome card. That's all for this week. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments what you thought about these cards. We'll be back next Tuesday with another community design review.